He thought her silence meant defeat, but silence is not surrender. Silence is an execution without blood. It is the soundless hour before dawn when truth stands naked and trembling before judgment. A woman's silence, once born from fear, becomes the most merciless form of power once she learns to love her own absence, because silence is not emptiness. It is the echo of everything once given, now withdrawn. It is the grave of illusion. There was a time when she spoke to be understood, when her voice bent itself to soothe fragile egos, when she translated her pain into softness, hoping it would be met with care. But men do not hear softness, they consume it. The more she explained, the more invisible she became. The louder she cried, the more he turned away. Until one day, her words died in her throat, not from weakness, but from evolution. Imagine him now standing before her in the ruins of his own self-image. He expects the familiar chaos, the pleading, the trembling, the emotional flood that once made him feel like a god. But she offers him nothing, only the cold mirror of her silence. And in that stillness, he sees himself small, terrified, irrelevant. He begins to speak faster, trying to fill the void she left open. But silence swallows his noise like an ocean swallowing a scream. In Jungian terms, her silence is the manifestation of the shadow made conscious. The feminine shadow, long suppressed by the compulsion to be wanted, now rises as Medusa, beautiful, unyielding, untouchable. The Medusa archetype is not rage, it is detachment. It is the moment the anima ceases to dance for the approval of the animus. She no longer performs, she observes. The serpent crown upon her head is not vengeance but clarity. Whoever dares to meet her gaze must face their own reflection, petrified, exposed, undone. The male wound quivers before that stillness. His fear has always been insignificance. Beneath his bravado lies the terror of being unseen, unneeded, unfelt. He pursues control to mask that void. Every woman who bends to him feeds his illusion of dominance. Every woman who begs confirms his myth of power. But when she withholds, when she stands in the sovereignty of silence, he is forced to confront what he truly fears, that his worth depends on her attention, and without it, he is nothing. The female wound is the inverse. She has feared abandonment more than death. She has confused rejection with annihilation. So she spoke endlessly, pleaded endlessly, explaining herself to deaf ears, believing that if she just said the right words, she would be loved. But love built on explanation is slavery. It binds the soul to an unending defense of its right to exist. Her silence, then, is not cruelty. It is liberation. It is the moment she stops asking to be seen and starts seeing herself. Do you understand what happens when a woman no longer explains? The masculine ego begins to collapse cell by cell, because silence is not passive, it is confrontational. It says, "Your power over me has ended." It says, "I owe you no reaction, no proof, no echo." It says, "I am not your mirror anymore." That is the apocalypse of every man who built his identity upon her submission. In this silence, she becomes mythic, a storm held in stillness, a temple stripped of worshippers. She no longer needs to shout her boundaries, they hum through the air around her. Her eyes become the threshold between the known and the unknowable. The more he reaches, the more the void consumes his reach, because power does not chase. Power withdraws. Power allows absence to do what presence never could: expose the hunger of those who took her for granted. Tonight, remember this: silence is not avoidance. It is a weapon forged in the ashes of humiliation. It is what remains when words have failed, when empathy has been drained, when explanations have turned to dust. To sit in silence is to refuse participation in your own diminishment. It is to look at the chaos and say, "I will not feed this anymore." So tonight, sit in silence. Do not justify, do not explain. Let someone feel your absence like a funeral. Let them choke on the echo of your restraint. Because silence, when chosen consciously, becomes the highest form of dominance. It does not scream, it teaches through lack. It does not punish, it reveals. And the revelation is this: the one who needs noise to feel powerful will always fear the one who can command the room without a word. Silence has a texture. It moves through a room like smoke, wrapping itself around the fragile architecture of ego until breath becomes confession. The man who once demanded her words now trembles before the quiet he created. His arrogance decays into questions that will never be answered. That is how silence kills, not with violence but with mirrors. It makes him face the truth he avoided through dominance, that she was never conquered, only patient. In the mythology of the psyche, silence belongs to the underworld. It is the territory of Persephone after the descent, when innocence dies and the dark feminine rises. The descent is not punishment. It is initiation. Every woman must go there once, stripped of comfort, stripped of identity, stripped of her need to be heard. Down there, the voices that once filled her mind, his approval, society's praise, her own doubts, dissolve into dust. What remains is the raw, soundless awareness of power that requires no witness. This is the paradox of the silent woman. Her restraint is mistaken for surrender, but it is in fact the absence of dependency. She no longer needs to persuade anyone of her worth. She has withdrawn her energy from the theater of justification. She has seen how easily love becomes a transaction, words traded for validation, emotion traded for control. Now she offers nothing. Her stillness becomes sacred territory, forbidden to the uninitiated. Watch him as he circles her silence like a predator who suddenly realizes he has been trapped inside his own hunger. He will provoke, test, accuse. He will say she is cold, detached, cruel. What he truly means is that she has become unreadable. His power was built on predicting her reactions, manipulating her empathy. But a silent woman cannot be manipulated. She gives no foothold, no resistance, no weakness to exploit. She has turned her silence into armor, invisible, impenetrable, lethal. Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow, when the psyche meets its hidden opposite. For the man, her silence reflects the emptiness within him, the void he spends his life disguising with noise. For the woman, her silence confronts her own past self, the one who spoke too much, apologized too much, explained her worth to the unworthy. Both are forced to see what they denied. That love contaminated by fear is not love, but dependency. There is cruelty in clarity. Once a woman truly sees, she cannot unsee. Once she knows how easily emotion becomes weaponized, how explanations become cages, she withdraws into an unbending calm. This calm terrifies the unhealed masculine because it dismantles his illusion of importance. To a man who feeds on reaction, indifference is death. He will scream into the silence, hoping to provoke a pulse, but she no longer pulses for him. Her rhythm has changed. It now beats in time with her own becoming. Silence then becomes language. It speaks in absence. It communicates boundaries without words. It says, "I am done performing." It says, "I will not mother your ego." It says, "You cannot touch me through chaos anymore." And each unspoken sentence cuts deeper than 1,000 arguments, because the mind cannot fight what it cannot grasp. The more he tries to decode her silence, the louder his own demons become. He will call her mysterious. He will call her heartless. He will tell himself she must be broken. But these are the stories of men who cannot accept that they have lost control. The silent woman does not belong to his narrative anymore. She has become mythic, not in the way of fantasy, but in the way of inevitability. Like nightfall, she does not ask permission to arrive. She simply does. And when she does, all false light must fade. You listening now understand this. Silence is not a retreat. It is strategy. It is the art of conserving energy until it becomes wisdom. Do not waste your breath explaining truth to those committed to misunderstanding it. Withdraw. Watch. Let their confusion devour them. For in every human interaction, power flows toward the one who speaks less, the one who can wait, the one who can bear the discomfort of being misunderstood without needing to fix it. To master silence is to master the battlefield of emotion. It requires brutal discipline. You must learn to tolerate the shaking hands, the pounding heart, the urge to explain and do nothing. You must learn to endure the burning need to correct lies and say nothing. Because silence is not the absence of reaction. It is the mastery of reaction. It is choosing not to give your energy where it will only be drained. So tonight, when the ghosts of explanation rise again, when the compulsion to reach out claws at your throat, remember, every word you withhold is a blade returned to your hand. Let it rest there. Let it gleam in stillness. Those who once fed on your words will starve in your silence, and as they starve, you will grow vast, cold, untouchable. Silence is the crucible where false gods die. Every illusion that once ruled her, the need to be chosen, the need to be understood, the need to be loved in her softness, burns away in that quiet fire. What remains is metal, cold, forged, unbreakable. She no longer bends toward those who mistook her warmth for weakness. She no longer explains her distance. She has learned the sacred truth of alchemy. Absence transmutes pain into power. He cannot comprehend it. His world is built on response, on proof that he still matters. Every unanswered message corrodes his confidence. Every moment without her validation becomes a mirror showing him the smallness he worked so hard to hide. Silence exposes him, not because she punishes, but because she simply stops participating in the illusion. The illusion that he was the sun and she, the orbit. Now she is the void, and he feels his light collapse inward. In the psyche, the feminine silence is not emptiness, it is gestation. It is the sacred interval where creation reorganizes itself. Jung wrote that all transformation begins in the underworld in darkness. This is that darkness. The silence is not void but womb. What he perceives as rejection is her metamorphosis. She has entered the archetype of the shadow queen, detached, disciplined, exacting. She no longer begs for mercy. She becomes mercy's absence. He once touched her and felt warmth. Now he reaches and feels nothing. He panics at the void, mistaking it for hatred when in truth it is neutrality, the most dangerous state of all, because neutrality means she no longer needs the outcome. She has stopped playing the game entirely. When a woman no longer hopes, she becomes untouchable. Hope is the leash of the wounded feminine. Its absence is sovereignty. He remembers the nights she pleaded, her voice trembling between love and despair. He remembers how he turned away, basking in the thrill of control. He thought her desperation confirmed his worth, but every act of indifference he gave her became a seed of awakening. Her pain, once his playground, became her teacher. Now she stands before him, not as the girl he conquered, but as the silence he cannot bear. There is no fury in her stillness. Fury would still imply connection. What she offers now is detachment, clean and surgical. Detachment is the highest cruelty because it grants no access to redemption. It denies the guilty their ritual of forgiveness. He longs for anger. Anger would mean she still feels, but her silence tells him she no longer does. It is a funeral without flowers, an ending without ceremony. Just distance, vast and irreversible. This is the lesson hidden in the myth of Medusa. The serpent-haired goddess was not born a monster. She was made one by violation. Her transformation was not curse but reclamation. The gaze that once invited destruction became the weapon that prevented it. Her silence, her stillness, her untouchable gaze, all of it a defense born from awakening. The woman who once begged the world to listen now petrifies those who try to possess her. Her silence becomes her gaze, a reflection so piercing it freezes anyone who dares to meet it. In Jungian language, this is individuation, the merging of light and shadow into wholeness. The dark feminine does not seek harmony through obedience. She seeks it through truth, no matter how merciless. Her silence is her declaration of sovereignty over her own psyche. She no longer allows external validation to dictate her value. Every unspoken word becomes a boundary. Every refusal to react becomes a crown. And yet, this silence is not cold for its own sake. It is sacred discipline. It protects her from returning to the addiction of reaction. Every word withheld becomes a devotion to herself. Every unanswered plea becomes a ritual of purification. The world mistakes her stillness for emptiness because it cannot comprehend power that does not demand attention. You, listening, understand this. When you withhold your words, you reclaim your energy. When you no longer need to correct their version of you, you become mythic. You cease to exist as a character in their story. You become the silence between sentences, the force that shapes without being seen. This is how the dark feminine rules, not through confrontation but through disappearance. Tonight, refuse the urge to explain. Let them wonder. Let their minds twist around your absence like ivy around stone. Every unanswered question becomes a mirror. Every moment of stillness tightens the noose of their own self-awareness. You owe no closure to those who shattered your peace. Let your silence be their teacher and your detachment their reckoning. Because the one who controls the silence controls the meaning, and meaning is the true currency of power. Speak only when your words are law. Until then, say nothing. Watch the world bend to fill the void your silence creates. That is how queens are made, not through noise but through absence. In silence, her presence becomes unbearable, not because she demands to be seen, but because she no longer cares to be. Power radiates from that indifference, the way night commands attention without sound, the way death commands respect without motion. She has become both. A woman who no longer performs for love, who no longer softens truth, is a woman who has crossed the threshold of human fear. She has met the void and decided to stay. He does not understand that her silence is communication. Every withheld word says, "You lost access." Every glance withheld says, "You are no longer worth the energy of witness." The masculine that once thrived on domination now faces its reflection in her detachment. It cannot control what it cannot provoke. And so, he spirals, mistaking absence for cruelty, stillness for scorn. But what he really feels is withdrawal, the energetic famine that follows after he has fed for too long on her light. This is the nature of projection, the ancient psychological dance Jung described. He projected his shadow onto her, making her the vessel for his unowned chaos. She carried it, believing it was hers to heal. But the moment she fell silent, the mirror reversed. All his noise returned to its source. The rage, the insecurity, the hunger, all of it rebounded back into his own psyche. Silence made him accountable. That is why he fears it, because silence reveals what manipulation conceals. Every woman who awakens to this truth enters the archetype of the siren, not the seductress who lures, but the one who commands without touch. Her silence is the song that only the unconscious can hear. It draws the unhealed toward her, exposing their desperation, their need for control, their addiction to validation. And then, when they arrive, expecting her to feed their ego once more, she says nothing. The silence devours them whole. That is the justice of the siren. She drowns not through sound, but through the absence of response. He calls her dangerous now. He tells himself she is manipulative, heartless, inhuman. But what he cannot name is what he fears, that she is free. Because true freedom is not found in love returned, but in no longer needing love to feel whole. She has seen the machinery of power between man and woman, the endless cycle of projection and need, and she has stepped outside of it. To those still trapped within, that detachment looks like cruelty. But it is not cruelty, it is sovereignty. There is a silence that punishes, and a silence that purifies. Hers is both. Punishment for those who betrayed her softness, purification for the self that once believed love required suffering. She no longer gives closure, because closure is another form of control. She lets the unanswered question fester in his mind, knowing it will consume him faster than any argument ever could. She understands now that sometimes the most compassionate act is the absence of mercy. To let the other confront themselves without distraction, without escape. This is the stoic heart of power. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the greatest revenge is not to resemble the one who wronged you. Her silence is that revenge. She does not become cruel in return. She becomes distant, detached, divine. Where he expected chaos, he finds calm. Where he sought guilt, he finds indifference. He stands before her like a sinner at a closed temple, begging for an audience that no longer exists. Inside her, the chaos has gone quiet too. The war between needing and knowing has ended. She no longer fights for understanding. She no longer bargains with ghosts. The silence that once terrified her has become her throne. It is where she meets herself, stripped of delusion, radiant in solitude. She no longer measures her worth in echoes. The absence of noise has become the proof of her evolution. You listening learn to hold your silence like a blade. Let it rest on your tongue until you taste its iron. Speak only when your words serve purpose, not pain. When they come to provoke, to test, to lure you back into the dance, do nothing. Watch. Let them exhaust themselves against your quiet. Power is not in the reaction, it is in restraint. The one who speaks first loses. The one who needs to be understood submits. There will come a moment when you realize you no longer need to explain who you are to anyone. That moment is your initiation. It will feel like death at first, the death of the pleaser, the empath, the girl who believed love must be earned through understanding. But after the death comes stillness. And from stillness, a voice rises, not loud, not desperate, but absolute. The voice of your silence. The one that says, I am done being small. Do not break that silence to comfort the weak. Do not fill it with apologies for your evolution. Let the discomfort of others be the proof of your growth. You are no longer responsible for their lessons, only your own. And your greatest lesson is this: silence is not the end of your voice. It is the beginning of your command. There comes a point when silence no longer feels like withholding, it feels like truth. It stops being a performance and becomes a state of being. She does not choose silence anymore, she is silence. It moves through her veins like winter wind, clean, cutting, necessary. Everything false dies in its path. Every attachment built on illusion crumbles beneath it. This is not the silence of repression. This is the silence of evolution, the calm after the inner war. When all masks have burned and only essence remains. He stands before her, still speaking, still pleading, still reaching for the ghost of the woman who used to respond. He calls her heartless because he cannot understand what has happened. He mistakes peace for emptiness. He confuses detachment with loss. But the truth is simpler, colder. She no longer bleeds for what does not deserve her. The wound that once drove her to chase is gone. The need that once bound her has dissolved. What he sees as cruelty is simply absence. The absence of the weakness that once kept her on her knees. This is what happens when the anima ascends beyond the reach of the unhealed animus. She becomes archetype, no longer individual but force. The witch, the siren, the shadow queen names for the same power wearing different masks. She is the union of shadow and light, the alchemical marriage within the self. Her silence is the ring that seals it. She no longer seeks to be completed by another because she has already met her own depths. Jung called this individuation. The mystics called it awakening. It feels like solitude, but it is sovereignty. Every woman who reaches this point becomes a threat to the collective illusion. The world is not built to handle silent women. It prefers them soft, self-doubting, endlessly explaining. Silence dismantles that economy. A silent woman cannot be sold, convinced, or controlled. She answers to no narrative. Her stillness breaks the rhythm of the herd, forcing others to confront the noise within themselves. That is why they will try to name her narcissist, witch, cold, cruel, anything to make sense of what cannot be owned. But she no longer hears them. Their words pass through her like wind through ruins. She has nothing left to prove. The old self, the one who sought validation, who mistook acceptance for safety, is dead. She buried her beneath layers of silence and watched the soil bloom. From that grave rose the woman who no longer needs to be liked, because she has learned to be free. Freedom has no need for witnesses. Look closely at her. There is no anger in her eyes, only distance. Distance is not indifference, it is perspective. She sees through everything now. She sees how people beg for love yet flee from truth. How they claim to crave connection, yet tremble before authenticity. She will not return to that delusion. Her silence protects her from the smallness of their world. She will not lower her vibration to be understood by those addicted to noise. And yet her silence is not isolation. It is communion with something higher, the deep, unshakable awareness that she belongs to herself. In the stillness, she hears the voice of the eternal feminine, not the submissive mother or the pleasing lover, but the ruler of thresholds. The one who guards her own soul like sacred ground. The one who loves without attachment, gives without depletion, leaves without guilt. That is the woman silence builds. He will try one last time, a message, a memory, a plea. He will promise change, beg for dialogue, confess regret. But she does not reply, not out of spite but out of wisdom. She knows that to answer is to re-enter the illusion. To respond is to reopen the wound. So she stays silent not because she doesn't care but because she finally does, for herself. You listening understand this truth. The silence you fear is the silence that will set you free. The discomfort of not being understood is the baptism of power. Stop chasing clarity from those committed to confusion. Stop offering explanations to the deaf. Your silence is your initiation. It separates you from the world of reaction, from the hunger to be seen. It is not the absence of love. It is the birth of self-respect. So tonight, when the old ghosts whisper your name, do not answer. Let the echo fade into nothing. Let the emptiness speak for you. Because those who deserve your energy will never require your explanation. They will understand your silence for what it is: truth, boundary, and finality. The woman who knows her worth does not argue, she vanishes.